The garage door closed with a sound that had meant safety for 53 years, and Raymond stood in the cold November dark holding his torque wrench in one hand and a plastic bag with 2 pairs of socks in the other. His wife Lillian stood beside him on the sidewalk, her adding machine tape folded into a square in her coat pocket, the paper so thin and old it felt like tissue against her fingers. She was 74 years old, and she was holding everything she owned in the pockets of a winter coat her daughter had bought her 6 years ago. Raymond's son Garrett was locking the garage door with a key that Raymond had handed over because Garrett had asked for it and Raymond had not known how to say no to his own son. "You understand this is temporary," Garrett said. He was 49 years old, a surgeon, and he did not look at his father when he said it, "just until we finalize the paperwork. The developer needs the property vacant for the environmental survey. 3 weeks, tops." Raymond said nothing. He had been a mechanic for 47 years. He knew when a bolt was about to strip. He knew the sound of an engine that was about to seize. He knew the silence of a man who was about to be erased. Lillian touched his arm. Her hand was cold. She had not worn gloves because she had not known she would need gloves when she was leaving her home of 53 years. The house was a 2-story colonial on Sycamore Street in a town called Newton, Massachusetts, and Raymond had bought it in 1969 for $34,000 with money he had saved by working double shifts at the Texaco garage on Washington Street for 11 years. He had painted every room himself. He had replaced the water heater in 1977 and the roof in 1985 and the furnace in 1994. He had built the back deck in the summer of 1982 with wood he had bought from a lumberyard that no longer existed. Lillian had kept the books for a hardware store on Walnut Street for 31 years. She had balanced every ledger with a pencil and a green eyeshade she had bought from a shop in Harvard Square in 1965. She had raised 6 children in that house. She had cooked 5,000 dinners. She had sewed Halloween costumes and birthday banners and wedding veils. She had never asked for anything. The house was now worth $1.4 million. A developer named Peter Hollings wanted to buy it and tear it down and build 6 luxury townhomes on the lot. 5 of Raymond and Lillian's 6 children had agreed to the sale. The 6th child, Dennis, had not been told until after the decision was made. Garrett unlocked the trunk of his silver Mercedes sedan and gestured for his parents to put their bags inside. "Mom, you can't take that chair," he said. Lillian had been carrying a mahogany rocking chair she had inherited from her mother. She had been rocking in it for 42 years. She had nursed every one of her children in that chair. She had fallen asleep in it the night her father died. The wood was worn smooth where her hands had held it. She put it down on the sidewalk. "We'll store it," Garrett said. "You can get everything back when the project is approved." Raymond knew this was a lie. He knew that when a developer demolishes a house, everything inside it disappears. He knew that the rocking chair would end up in a dumpster or sold at an estate sale or given to a stranger who would not know that Lillian had held 6 infants in that chair. He did not say anything. Lillian folded the adding machine tape from her pocket and unfolded it and looked at the numbers written in pencil on the yellowed paper. The numbers were from March 17, 1962. The ledger had balanced to the penny. She had been 24 years old. She had worn a blue dress with white buttons. She had walked home in the rain because she had not had money for the bus. She folded the tape and put it back in her pocket. Garrett drove them to a Holiday Inn on Route 9 in a town called Framingham. The room had 2 double beds and a television that did not work and a heater that clicked all night. The carpet was the color of oatmeal. The curtains were the color of dust. He left after 10 minutes. Raymond sat on the edge of the bed and held his torque wrench in both hands. The tool was a Snap-on TQFR 250 1969 model, and he had bought it in December of that year with cash he had borrowed from his brother. The wrench was calibrated to within 4% of perfect accuracy. He had used it to rebuild engines for 4 decades. He had taught Dennis how to torque a cylinder head bolt to exactly 72 foot-pounds with that wrench. Dennis had been 12 years old, and he had done it perfectly on the first try. The torque wrench was the most precise thing Raymond had ever owned. Now he held in a hotel room that smelled like bleach and regret. Lillian turned on the television because she did not know what else to do. A commercial was playing for a drug that treated a disease she did not have. She turned it off. "We could call Mary," she said. Mary was the teacher. The 4th child, the one who had voted for the sale because she thought it was the practical choice. "No," Raymond said. "We could call Thomas." Thomas was the architect. The 3rd child, he had drawn the preliminary plans for the townhomes himself. "No." "We could call?" "No." They sat in silence for an hour. At 9 o'clock, the phone in the room rang. Raymond answered it. It was Dennis. Dennis was 41 years old. He worked at a mobile station on Washington Street in Newton. He had been working there for 19 years. He had never married. He lived in a one-bedroom apartment above a laundromat on Langley Road. The apartment had a kitchen the size of a closet and a bathroom with a shower that dripped constantly and a bedroom that faced an alley. He drove a 1998 Honda Civic with 287,000 miles on it. He had no savings. He had no investments. He had no retirement plan. He was the only child who had not voted for the sale. He was the only child who had not been asked. "Dad," Dennis said. "Where are you?" Raymond told him. "I'm coming to get you," Dennis said. "It's too far." "You have work tomorrow." "I'm coming to get you." Dennis arrived at the Holiday Inn at 11:15 that night. He was wearing a gray sweatshirt with oil stains on the sleeves. His hands were black with grease. He had not showered after his shift. He had driven 40 minutes without stopping. He knocked on the door, and when Raymond opened it, Dennis looked at his father and saw something he had never seen before, a man who had given up. "You're staying with me," Dennis said. Raymond shook his head. "Son, you don't have room. I have a floor. You have a couch. I have a floor and a couch. You're staying with me." Lillian was crying. She had not cried when she left the house. She had not cried when Garrett took the rocking chair. She had not cried in the hotel. But she cried when Dennis took the torch from Raymond's hands and carried it to the Honda Civic and put it in the trunk next to the plastic bag with the 2 pairs of socks. Dennis drove them to his apartment on Langley Road in Newton. The apartment was above a laundromat that operated 24 hours a day. The stairs were narrow and steep and smelled like detergent and damp fabric. The door at the top was painted blue, and the paint was peeling at the edges, and the lock was old and sometimes stuck. The apartment had 1 bedroom. The bedroom had a mattress on the floor and a lamp without a shade and a pile of clothes in the corner that Dennis had been meaning to fold for 3 months. The living room had a couch that folded out into a bed that was 10 years old and had a spring that poked through the fabric. The kitchen had a table with 2 chairs and a microwave that beeped whenever the door was opened. Dennis gave his parents the bedroom. He slept on the couch. In the morning, Lillian woke at 6:30 because she had always woken at 6:30. She walked into the kitchen and found Dennis making coffee from a can of Folgers that had been sitting on the counter for weeks. The coffee was weak. The creamer was expired. She drank it anyway. Raymond came out at 7. He was wearing the same clothes he had worn the day before. He had not unpacked the plastic bag with the 2 pairs of socks. He did not know where to put them. "I'll get you clothes," Dennis said. "I get paid Friday." Raymond nodded. "I'll call Garrett today," Raymond said. "I'll figure out what's happening with the house." "Dad," Dennis said, "Garrett is not going to give you the house back." There was a long silence. "I know," Raymond said. The days that followed were a geography of small humiliations. Raymond had to ask Dennis for money to buy a toothbrush. He had to ask Dennis for the key to the apartment when he wanted to go for a walk. He had to sit in the laundromat downstairs while his clothes washed because there was no washing machine in the apartment, and he could not afford the coin laundry on his own. Lillian made sandwiches from bread and margarine because that was what they had. She learned to cook on a hot plate because the stove in Dennis's apartment did not work. She washed dishes in a bathroom sink. They did not complain. On the 4th day, Raymond walked to the mobile station where Dennis worked. It was 3 miles from the apartment. He walked because he did not have bus fare. He walked because he needed to do something. Dennis was under a car. His legs were sticking out from under the chassis. He was replacing an oil pan gasket on a 2005 Ford Explorer. Raymond stood in the bay and watched his son work. Dennis slid out from under the car and saw his father standing there. He wiped his hands on a rag that was already black. "Dad, what are you doing here? I wanted to see where you work." "You've seen it before. I wanted to see it again." Dennis stood up. He was 41 years old, and he had grease in the lines of his palms and oil under his fingernails and a cut on his knuckle that he had gotten the day before and had not bothered to bandage. "You don't have to stay with me," Dennis said. "I know it's not what you're used to." Raymond looked around the garage. The concrete floor was stained with decades of oil and antifreeze and transmission fluid. The air smelled like rubber and gasoline and metal. A radio was playing classic rock from a station that had been playing classic rock since Raymond was Dennis's age. "This is exactly what I'm used to," Raymond said. He picked up a wrench and slid under the car. They worked together for 3 hours. They did not talk much. They did not need to. On the 9th day, Garrett came to the apartment. He arrived in his silver Mercedes sedan at 6 o'clock in the evening. He was wearing a Patagonia vest over a collared shirt. His shoes were leather and polished. He carried a leather folder with papers inside. Dennis met him at the bottom of the stairs. "You're not coming up," Dennis said. "I need to talk to Mom and Dad." "You're not coming up." "Dennis, I'm not going to argue with you. This is a legal matter. The developer needs signatures on the final purchase agreement. We're closing in 3 weeks. They're not signing anything. They've already signed the initial agreement. You don't have a say in this. You don't own the house. You don't have any legal standing." Dennis looked at his brother. Garrett was 6 feet tall. Dennis was 5'9". Garrett had an annual income of $400,000. Dennis had an annual income of $32,000. "They're my parents," Dennis said. "They're my parents too. You put them in a hotel. It was temporary. It's been 9 days." Garrett's jaw tightened. He opened the leather folder and pulled out a document. "The developer needs this signed by Friday. If it's not signed, the deal falls through. They lose the deposit. Mom and Dad lose their equity. I'm trying to protect them. You're trying to protect your commission." Garrett said nothing. Dennis took the document. He did not read it. He folded it in half and put it in his pocket. "I'll make sure they see it," he said. "That's not how this works. I need to explain it to them." "You've explained enough." Garrett stood there for a long moment. The laundromat was running a cycle. The machines hummed and sloshed. A woman came out with a basket of wet clothes and walked past them without looking. "You're making a mistake," Garrett said. "Probably," Dennis said. Garrett got into his Mercedes and drove away. Dennis went upstairs. His parents were sitting at the kitchen table. Lillian was folding the adding machine tape again, running her fingers along the pencil marks. Raymond was holding the torque wrench, turning the calibration knob back and forth, listening to the clicks. "He wants you to sign this," Dennis said. He put the document on the table. Raymond looked at it, did not touch it. "It's the final agreement," Dennis said. "It says you give up all rights to the property and you receive a portion of the sale proceeds after the developer's fees and the children's shares." "How much?" Lillian said. "It doesn't say." Raymond picked up the document and read it. He read it slowly, moving his lips over the words. He had never been a fast reader. He was a mechanic. He read engines, not contracts. When he finished, he put it down. "I don't understand half of this," he said. "I don't either," Dennis said. They sat in silence. "I knew a lawyer once," Raymond said. "He worked on my car. He used to come to the garage with this old Buick. Sweet car. He said I was the only mechanic he trusted. What happened to him? He died 10 years ago. Do you remember his name?" William something. He had an office on the corner of Washington and Center, the building with the green awning?" "Yeah." Dennis stood up. "I'll look him up. He's dead. Maybe his firm is still there." Dennis went to the laundromat downstairs and used the pay phone. He called directory assistance. He asked for the law firm of William something on Washington and Center. The operator said there was no listing for that name. Dennis hung up. He stood in the laundromat and watched the dryer spin. The clothes tumbled in circles, colors blurred. He had no idea what to do. Then he remembered something. The something was a shoebox. When Dennis was 16 years old, his father had shown him a shoebox in the basement of the house on Sycamore Street. The shoebox was full of papers, receipts, warranty cards, deeds, a letter from the bank, a certificate of occupancy, an old survey map. Raymond had opened the box and taken out a piece of paper and shown it to Dennis. "This is the homestead exemption," Raymond had said. "I filed it in 1982. It means nobody can take the house from us for debts." Dennis had been 16. He had not understood. "It protects the equity," Raymond had said, "up to a certain amount. It means if something happens, the house is still ours." Dennis had forgotten about the shoebox for 25 years. Now he remembered. He went upstairs. "Dad," he said, "the shoebox. In the basement. The one with the papers." "What happened to it?" Raymond looked up. His face was blank for a moment. Then something flickered in his eyes. "I don't know," he said. "It was in the basement, in the corner near the hot water heater. I don't know if it's still there." "It might be," Dennis said. "Garrett said the house is empty. He said no one has been inside since you left. The developer has the keys. The developer has the keys to the garage. The house might still be unlocked." Dennis grabbed his jacket. It was a black Carhartt jacket with a torn zipper and a coffee stain on the sleeve. He put it on. "I'm going to the house," he said. "Dennis, don't. It's trespassing." "I know. You could get arrested." "I know. The developer has security." "Dad, what's in that shoebox?" Raymond looked at the torque wrench in his hands. The chrome was worn at the edges. The knurling was smooth from 40 years of use. "I don't know what's in it anymore," he said. "I haven't opened it in 20 years. But you remember filing the homestead exemption." "I remember." "And you remember what it says." "I remember what it says." Dennis opened the door. "I'll be back in an hour." The house on Sycamore Street was dark. Dennis parked his Honda Civic 3 blocks away. He walked through backyards and alleys. He knew these streets. He had grown up here. He had ridden his bike on these sidewalks. He had thrown a football in this park. He had kissed a girl named Sarah behind in 1995. The house looked abandoned. The windows were dark. The front door was locked. The garage door was down. A for sale sign was planted in the front yard, but it was not a normal for sale sign. It was a sign from the developer. This property is sold. 6 luxury home is coming soon. Dennis walked around to the back of the house. The back door was unlocked. He opened it and stepped inside. The house was empty. The furniture was gone. The carpets were gone. The walls were bare. The kitchen was stripped of cabinets. The appliances were gone. There was a hole in the wall where the refrigerator had been. Dennis walked through the house. His footsteps echoed on the hardwood floors. He went down the stairs to the basement. Basement was unfinished. The floor was concrete. The walls were cinder block. The hot water heater was still there, but it was disconnected. Pipes stuck out of the wall. In the corner, under a pile of old insulation, was the shoebox. It was exactly where Raymond had left it. Dennis picked it up. The cardboard was soft and damp. The lid was held on by a rubber band that snapped when he touched it. He opened the box. Inside were papers, dozens of them, yellowed and brittle. Receipts from the 1970s, a warranty card for a washing machine from 1984, a survey map from 1969, a deed, a mortgage statement, and a piece of paper with a blue border and a seal in the corner. The homestead exemption. Dennis pulled it out. The paper was thin and fragile. The ink was faded but legible. It was filed with the Middlesex County Registry of Deeds on June 14, 1982. It stated that the property at 42 Sycamore Street was the primary residence of Raymond and Lillian Morrison, and that the equity in the property was exempt from attachment up to the amount allowed by Massachusetts law. Dennis read it 3 times. Then he saw something else. Underneath the homestead exemption was another piece of paper. It was a letter, typewritten, dated October 3, 1991, was from a law firm in Boston. Dennis unfolded and read it by the light of his phone. The letter was addressed to Raymond Morrison at 42 Sycamore Street. It stated that the law firm was writing to confirm that the homestead exemption filed in 1982 remained in full force and effect. It stated that no subsequent filing had superseded it. It stated that the exemption automatically renewed every year under Massachusetts law. It stated that Raymond Morrison did not need to take any further action. Dennis stared at the letter. Then he looked at the date again. October 3, 1991. 32 years ago, his father had known. His father had known the homestead exemption was still valid. His father had known that the developer could not take the house. His father had known that the children could not force the sale, but his father had not said anything. Dennis put the papers back in the shoebox. He put the shoebox under his arm. He walked out of the house through the back door. He walked 3 blocks through the dark streets to his car. He drove back to his apartment. He went upstairs. Raymond and Lillian were sitting at the kitchen table. They had not moved. Dennis put the shoebox on the table. He opened it. He took out the homestead exemption and the letter from the law firm. He placed them on the table in front of his father. "Dad," he said, "you knew." Raymond looked at the papers. He did not touch them, "I knew," he said. "You knew the house was protected. You knew they couldn't take it. You knew all of it." "I knew." "Then why did you leave?" Raymond looked at his hands. They were the hands of an old man. Knuckles swollen with arthritis. Veins that rose like cords under thin skin. Fingers that had held wrenches for 47 years and could no longer make a fist. "Because Garrett asked me to," he said. Dennis waited. "He said it was the best thing for the family. He said the money would help everyone. He said the developer had already made commitments. He said if I didn't agree, I would be hurting my own children. They're hurting you. I know. They're taking everything. I know. And you let them." Raymond picked up the torque wrench. He turned the calibration knob. It clicked 6 times. "I didn't know how to stop them," he said. Lillian unfolded the adding machine tape. She ran her finger along the column of numbers. The pencil marks were still clear. "I did," she said. Both men turned to look at her. She was 74 years old. She had been a bookkeeper for 31 years. She had balanced ledgers. She had filed taxes. She had managed money that was not her own. She had never made a mistake. "I kept every document," she said. "Every deed, every letter, every homestead exemption. I knew where they were. I knew what they meant." "You knew about the shoebox," Dennis said. "I put the letter in the shoebox." Dennis stared at his mother. "You knew the house was protected," he said. And you let Garrett throw you out? I wanted to see what he would do. What? Lillian folded the tape and put it in her pocket. She looked at her son with eyes that had seen 6 children grow up and leave and become strangers. I wanted to see if any of them would stop, she said. The silence in the room was absolute. None of them stopped, she said. Except you. Dennis sat down. He looked at the papers on the table. The homestead exemption. The letter. 2 pieces of paper that could undo everything. 2 pieces of paper that could stop $1 million development deal. 2 pieces of paper that could give his parents back their house. What do we do now? He said. Raymond put the torque wrench on the table. He lined it up with the papers. The chrome caught the light from the bare bulb overhead. We figure out what we're worth, he said. Lillian stood up. She walked to the window that faced the alley. The streetlight cast a yellow glow on the wet pavement. Garrett is coming back on Friday, she said. He wants the document signed. He's coming here? He said he would come to the apartment. Dennis looked at his father. Raymond looked at the torque wrench. Then we have until Friday, Raymond said. To do what? To decide if we want to destroy our family. Dennis picked up the homestead exemption. The paper was so thin he could see the light through it. He read the words again. They had been filed in 1982. They were still valid. They were still law. They already destroyed it, Dennis said. Raymond shook his head. They made a mistake, he said. They thought we were weak. They thought we would just accept it. They thought we didn't have a choice. He picked up the torque wrench, but we have a choice. He held the torque wrench in his hands. The tool was 54 years old. It had been calibrated in 1969. It had never been off by more than 4%, and we have proof. The coffee on the stove had boiled dry. The smell of burnt grounds filled the small kitchen. The clock on the wall said 11:47. Outside, the laundromat hummed and sloshed. Lillian turned from the window. On Friday, she said, Garrett will come here with his papers and his lawyer and his plans for the money we will never see, and we will be ready. Dennis looked at his mother. She was not crying. She was not trembling. She was standing in the kitchen of a 1-bedroom apartment above a laundromat, wearing a coat she had bought 6 years ago, holding a piece of adding machine tape from 1962. She looked like a woman who had been waiting her whole life for this moment. He won't know what hit him, Raymond said. Dennis put the papers back in the shoebox. He closed the lid. He put the shoebox on the counter next to the expired creamer and the half-empty can of Folgers. The torque wrench sat on the table. The chrome gleamed. Friday was 2 days away. The game had not even started. Friday arrived wet. The rain started at dawn and did not stop. It fell in sheets against the windows of the apartment above the laundromat, turning the alley into a river of brown water that carried cigarette butts and candy wrappers toward the grate at the end of the block. Dennis had not slept. He had spent the night in the armchair by the window, watching the street, watching the lights go off in the bodega across the way, watching the last drunk stumble home at 3 a.m. The shoebox sat on the coffee table in front of him. He had opened it 7 times. He had read the homestead exemption 7 times. He had traced his finger along the signature at the bottom his father's name, written in ink that had faded to the color of dried blood. At 6:30, Lillian came out of the bedroom. She was wearing the same dress she had worn to church every Sunday for the last 12 years. It was navy blue with white flowers. She had ironed it the night before. You didn't sleep, she said. Neither did you. She did not deny it. She walked to the kitchen and put the coffee on. The smell filled the apartment. It was the only thing that seemed normal. Raymond came out at 7. He was wearing his work shirt, the one with the name patch that read Ray in cursive. He had not worn it since he retired. He had dug it out of the back of the closet at midnight. You look like you're going to a funeral, Lillian said. Maybe I am. They sat at the table. The torque wrench was in the center, next to the shoebox. Raymond had polished it with a rag. The chrome looked like a mirror. He'll bring a lawyer, Dennis said. I know. He'll bring papers. I know. He'll try to intimidate you. Raymond looked at the torque wrench. He picked it up and held it in his palm. The weight was familiar. The balance was perfect. I've been intimidated by better men than Garrett Cross, he said. I've had foremen scream in my face. I've had inspectors threaten to shut me down. I've had men twice his size tell me I was finished. And I'm still here. He set the wrench down gently. Garrett Cross is a boy who inherited a company. He doesn't know what it means to build something with your hands. He doesn't know what it means to calibrate a tool so precisely that it never fails. He doesn't know what it means to work for 54 years and have nothing to show for it except a torque wrench and a piece of paper. He looked at the shoebox. But I know what it means, and today he's going to learn. At 9:30, a black SUV pulled up in front of the laundromat. Dennis watched from the window. The rain had slowed to a drizzle, but the sky was still the color of bruises. The SUV idled for a long moment, then the back door opened. Garrett Cross stepped out. He was wearing a suit, navy blue. Italian wool. His shoes were polished to a shine that the rain could not dull. He looked up at the apartment building with an expression that Dennis could not read. Disgust, maybe, or indifference. It was hard to tell. A second man got out of the passenger side. He was older, with gray hair and wire-rimmed glasses. He carried a leather briefcase. The lawyer. Garrett looked at the apartment building again. Then he looked at the laundromat. The sign was flickering. One of the letters had burned out, so it read Alain de Mat. He turned to the lawyer and said something Dennis could not hear. The lawyer laughed. Dennis stepped away from the window. They're here. Lillian stood up. She smoothed her dress. She touched her hair. She looked at Raymond. Are you ready? Raymond picked up the torque wrench. He held it for a moment. Then he put it in his pocket. The handle stuck out. The chrome caught the light. I've been ready for 54 years. The knock on the door was sharp. Professional. 3 quick raps. Lillian opened it. Garrett Cross stood in the hallway. He was taller than Dennis remembered, or maybe he just seemed taller because of the suit. The rain had dotted his shoulders with small dark spots. Mrs. Cross, he said. Mr. Cross. The name hung in the air between them. They shared it. They shared blood. But standing there in the dim light of the hallway, they looked like strangers. May we come in? Lillian stepped aside. She did not smile. She did not offer coffee. Garrett entered. The lawyer followed. He looked around the apartment with the practiced neutrality of a man who had seen 1,000 apartments just like it. He did not judge. He did not approve. He simply observed. This is Mr. Harmon, Garrett said. Our legal counsel. Lillian nodded. She did not offer her hand. Dennis stood by the window. Raymond sat at the table. The torque wrench was visible in his pocket, but Garrett did not seem to notice. Or if he did not care. I appreciate you agreeing to meet with us, Garrett said. He stood in the center of the room, his hands clasped behind his back. He looked like a man giving a presentation. I know this has been difficult for everyone. Difficult? Raymond said. He said the word like it tasted bad. Garrett's smile faltered. I understand you have some concerns about the development project. I want to assure you that everything has been done according to the law. The property was legally acquired. The contracts were legally executed. We have all the documentation. I'm sure you do, Raymond said. Mr. Harmon opened his briefcase. He pulled out a stack of papers. They were crisp and white. They smelled like fresh ink. We have a settlement offer, Garrett said. We are prepared to offer you $50,000 for any claims you might have regarding the property. In exchange, you will sign a release of liability and a quitclaim deed affirming that you have no legal interest in the land. $50,000. Lillian did not move. Raymond did not blink. Dennis felt something cold settle in his chest. $50,000, Raymond said. It's more than generous, Garrett said. Given the circumstances. What circumstances? Garrett's smile tightened. The property has been reasoned. The permits have been approved. The foundation is already laid. There is nothing you can do to stop the development. This offer is a courtesy. A recognition of your history with the land. Lillian spoke. Her voice was quiet. It was the quiet of something that had been compressed for decades, waiting for the pressure to become unbearable. You want to pay us $50,000 to go away. I want to pay you $50,000 to acknowledge that the property is no longer yours. It was never mine, Lillian said. It was my father's, and his father's before him, and his father's before him. 120 years, Mr. Cross. That land has been in my family for 120 years. Garrett's expression did not change. I understand the emotional attachment, Mrs. Cross. But the law is clear. The property was sold in 2005. The sale was legal. The transfer was legal. Everything was according to the applicable statutes. Except it wasn't. The words came from Raymond. He stood up. The torque wrench swung against his leg. Except it wasn't, he repeated. The sale was not legal. The transfer was not legal, and you know it. Garrett's face went still. It was the stillness of a man who had just realized he had misread the room. I don't know what you're talking about. You do, Raymond said. He walked to the coffee table. He picked up the shoebox. He opened it. You know exactly what I'm talking about. He pulled out the homestead exemption. The paper was yellowed. The edges were frayed, but the words were still legible. The ink was still dark. This was filed in 1982, Raymond said. It exempts the property from forced sale. It means that even if the taxes weren't paid, even if the mortgage wasn't paid, the land could not be taken. It could not be sold without the signature of both property owners. He held up the paper. Where is my wife's signature? Garrett looked at the paper. His face did not change, but something shifted behind his eyes, something that looked like recognition. That document is not valid, Mr. Harmon said. It was filed over 40 years ago. The exemption has lapsed. No, Raymond said. It hasn't. He pulled out the letter from the county clerk. I called the county assessor's office yesterday. I asked them to check the status of the homestead exemption. They told me it is still active. It has never been revoked. It has never been superseded. It is still law. He laid the letter on the table. The sale in 2005 was illegal. The property was never rightfully transferred. And you knew that when you bought it. The silence in the room was absolute. Garrett stared at the letter. Mr. Harmon stared at the letter. The rain had stopped. The world outside was quiet. This is a mistake, Garrett said. It's not a mistake. It's a technicality. A clerical error. The exemption should have been removed when the property was sold. It was never sold, Raymond said. Not legally. Not without her signature. Lillian stepped forward. She looked at Garrett. She looked at him the way she had looked at him when he was 13 years old and had stolen a candy bar from the bodega. Disappointed, but not surprised. You knew, she said. When you bought the land, you knew. Garrett said nothing. You knew there was a problem with the title. You knew there was a gap. You knew that if anyone looked closely enough, they would find something wrong, and you bought it anyway, because you thought no one would ever look. Mrs. Cross, you thought we were old. You thought we were stupid. You thought we would just accept the check and disappear. She picked up the homestead exemption. But I kept this. I kept it for 42 years. I kept it because I knew that someday someone would try to take what was mine. And when they did, I would be ready. She folded the paper carefully and put it back in the shoebox. You should leave now, Mr. Cross. Garrett did not move. This isn't over, he said. It is. I will take this to court. I will fight this. I have lawyers. I have money. I have resources you cannot imagine. And I have a piece of paper from 1982, Lillian said, signed by the county clerk, stamped by the county seal, filed in the county records. I have the law on my side, Mr. Cross, and the law does not care how much money you have. She walked to the door. She opened it. The hallway was empty. The light was dim. The smell of wet concrete drifted in from outside. Goodbye, Mr. Cross. Garrett looked at her. For a moment, something flickered in his eyes, something that looked almost like shame, but it was gone as quickly as it came. He turned and walked out. Mr. Harmon followed. His briefcase was still open. He fumbled with the latches as he went. The door closed behind them. The lock clicked, and then there was silence. Dennis sat down. He had not realized he had been holding his breath. The air rushed out of him in a long, shaky exhale. Did that just happen? Lillian did not answer. She walked to the table and picked up the torque wrench. She held it in both hands. The chrome was warm from Raymond's pocket. He'll try something, Raymond said. He won't give up. He'll find a loophole. He'll file a motion. He'll try to drag this out until we run out of money or time or energy. I know, Lillian said. But he can't undo what's been done. The exemption is valid. The land is protected. And he knows it? Lillian set the torque wrench back on the table. Then we wait, she said. For what? For him to realize that he has lost. They did not have to wait long. 3 days later, a letter arrived. It was hand-delivered, no return address. The envelope was thick cream-colored paper. Lillian opened it at the kitchen table. Inside was a single sheet of paper and a check. The check was for $2 million. Lillian read the letter. Her face did not change. She read it again. Then she set it down. He's withdrawing the development, she said. He's selling the land back to us. For $1. Raymond picked up the letter. Mrs. Cross, I have reviewed the documentation you provided. My lawyers have confirmed its validity. The sale in 2005 was conducted in error, and I cannot in good conscience proceed with the development without clear title. I am returning the land to you. The deed will be filed with the county by the end of the week. I have also enclosed a payment for the emotional and financial hardship this process has caused your family. I am sorry. Garrett Cross. Raymond read the letter twice. Then he folded it and put it in his pocket. He's sorry, he said. He's scared, Lillian said. Same thing. She looked at the check. $2 million. It was more money than she had seen in her entire life. It was more money than she had ever imagined having. But it did not change what had happened. It did not bring back the years she had spent in that apartment above the laundromat. It did not bring back the nights she had lain awake wondering if she had made a mistake. It did not bring back the feeling of watching her children leave and become strangers. But it was something. What do we do with it? Dennis asked. Lillian looked at the check. She looked at the torque wrench. She looked at her husband, who was standing by the window, watching the rain start to fall again. "We go home," she said. The house was empty. They drove out on a Tuesday. The sky was clear and blue, the kind of sky that made the world feel clean and new. Dennis drove. Lillian sat in the passenger seat. Raymond sat in the back, the torque wrench across his lap. The road was familiar. It had been 22 years since they had driven it, but the turns were the same, the landmarks were the same, the feeling in the pit of the stomach was the same. They passed the gas station where Raymond used to buy his coffee. They passed the church where Lillian had been baptized. They passed the field where Dennis had played baseball as a boy. And then they came to the house. It was smaller than Dennis remembered. It was a white farmhouse with a wraparound porch and a tin roof. The paint was peeling. The porch sagged. The windows were dark and empty. But it was still there. It had survived. They pulled into the driveway. The gravel crunched under the tires. The sound was exactly the same as it had been in 1982. Lillian got out of the car. She stood in the driveway and looked at the house. The roof, the porch, the door, the windows. She looked at everything. Then she started to cry. Raymond got out of the car. He walked to her. He put his arm around her shoulder. "We're home," he said. She nodded. She could not speak. The house was not in good condition. The roof leaked. The floorboards were warped. The walls were stained with water damage. The kitchen had been gutted. The appliances were gone. The cabinets were hanging off their hinges. But it was theirs. They spent the first week cleaning. Dennis swept. Lillian scrubbed. Raymond fixed what he could fix with the torque wrench and a roll of duct tape. The work was hard. The work was exhausting. The work was the best thing they had done in years. On the third day, Dennis found something in the pantry. It was a jar. A small mason jar covered in dust, hidden behind a loose board. He pulled it out and held it up to the light. Inside was a key. An old brass key, tarnished and green. It was attached to a piece of string with a tag that read, "For Lillian, from Papa." Dennis carried the jar to the kitchen. "What is it?" Lillian asked. He handed it to her. She looked at the jar. She looked at the key. She read the tag. And then she smiled. It was the first time Dennis had seen her smile in years. "Your grandfather," she said. "He used to hide things, keys, coins, letters. He said it was his way of leaving surprises for the future." She opened the jar. She took out the key. She held it in her palm. "I wonder what it opens." They never found out. The key did not fit any lock in the house. It did not fit the shed. It did not fit the mailbox. It was a mystery that would never be solved. But Lillian kept it anyway. She put it in the shoebox, next to the homestead exemption and the torque wrench and the letter from Garrett Cross. She put the shoebox on the shelf in the pantry, where the jar had been. "Maybe someday," she said. "Maybe someday we'll find out." The weeks passed. The house started to look like a home again. The roof was fixed. The floorboards were replaced. The walls were painted. The kitchen was rebuilt. Raymond installed a new stove. Lillian hung new curtains. Dennis planted flowers in the garden. It was not the same as it had been. It could never be the same, but it was close enough. One evening they sat on the porch. The sun was setting. The sky was orange and pink and purple. The air smelled like cut grass and honeysuckle. It was the kind of evening that made you believe that everything was going to be okay. Lillian held the torque wrench in her hands. She had polished it again. The chrome gleamed in the fading light. "What are you going to do with it?" Dennis asked. She looked at the wrench. She thought about the years it had spent in her husband's hands. She thought about the cars it had fixed, the engines it had tuned, the work it had done. "I'm going to keep it," she said. "It's a reminder." Of what? She looked out at the yard. The grass was green. The flowers were blooming. The fence was straight. "That sometimes," she said, "the things that break you are the things that make you whole." Raymond came out of the house. He was holding 2 glasses of iced tea. He handed one to Lillian and one to Dennis. He sat down on the porch steps and looked at the sky. "It's a good night," he said. "It is," Lillian said. They sat in silence. The crickets started to sing. The stars started to come out. The world was quiet and still and peaceful. Dennis looked at his parents. They were old. They were tired. They had been through more than anyone should have to endure. But they were together. They were home. They were happy. He thought about the torque wrench. He thought about the shoebox. He thought about the key that opened nothing. And he thought about the letter from Garrett Cross. The letter had said, "I am sorry." It had not said, "I was wrong." It had not said, "I will make it right." It had not said, "I understand what I took from you." Just, "I am sorry." 3 words. 3 words that could not undo 22 years. 3 words that could not bring back the nights Lillian had cried herself to sleep. 3 words that could not erase the memory of watching Raymond walk out the door. carrying nothing but a torque wrench, but 3 words were something. They were not forgiveness. They were not closure. They were not peace, but they were something. That night, after his parents had gone to bed, Dennis walked to the pantry. He opened the shoebox. He looked at the homestead exemption, the letter from the county clerk, the check for $2 million, the key, the torque wrench, and the letter. He picked up the letter. He read it again. The handwriting was neat. The words were measured. The apology was careful. I am sorry. He folded the letter and put it back in the shoebox. He closed the lid. He stood in the dark pantry, the shoebox in his hands, the weight of everything that happened pressing down on him. And then he put the shoebox back on the shelf. He walked out of the pantry. He walked through the kitchen, past the new stove, past the new curtains, past the flowers on the windowsill. He walked to the front door. He opened it. The night air was cool. The moon was full. The yard was silver and still. He stood on the porch and looked out at the world. The crickets were still singing. The stars were still shining. The world was still turning. And somewhere, in a dark apartment above a laundromat, a woman named Lillian Cross was sleeping in her own bed, in her own house, on her own land, for the first time in 22 years. It was not a happy ending. It was not a sad ending. It was an ending. And there was still a key in the shoebox that opened nothing.